Good morning, I'm Margaret Gray. I'm sitting here at the Central Hawke's Bay Settlers Museum. It's a museum that I've been associated with almost from its inception in 1986, having various roles within the museum. I am also the author of Abbotsford, A History of Waipawa. And this morning, I would like to talk to you about a very special acquisition that we have within the museum, and it's known to us as the Jacquardi violin. The museum over the years has acquired some really precious objects, most of them relating to the area of Central Hawke's Bay. And I'm here this morning to talk about an exceptional piece of musical equipment. To us, it's known as the Jacquardi violin. It came into the possession of the museum about 21 years ago. Interesting story, the way it came. A man from Waikanae called Ray Gossman was up in Napier. He found this violin. It was not in very good order at the time. He took it back to his home in Waikanae and began the initial restoration of it. He discovered that inside there was a little piece of paper written in a very nice hand that said, Jacquardi violin, Waipawa, Central Hawke's Bay, 1951. So he got in touch with the museum and wanted us to find out where it came from and who made it. So that was the start of the journey. It didn't take us long to work out exactly who had made it. So we were quite pleased. We were very pleased to acquire the said violin. So when Ray Gossman had finished with it, he actually personally brought it up to Waipawa. So we thought this was a pretty special occasion, so we better welcome it with aplomb. So we had a small recital. Now Mr. Ray Gossman, he played the said violin, and we were up at 11 Windsor Hill, and the accompaniment to the violin was Kath Fletcher on Warwick Mather's very lovely antique grand piano. So it was a lovely introduction for the violin to come back to Waipawa. Now I know you all want to know who made this violin, and it is a man called John Harold Hardy, and everybody knew him as Jack. Now he was born in Takapā in 1880. It is believed he was renowned as a very clever fellow. He was a voracious reader. He liked to read anything scientific. He played the accordion, and he was also a keen photographer. Jack, in his early 20s or late teens, found employment at McLeod's mill. Now that unfortunately was ravaged by fire, and following that he found employment at the Bibby's farm called Lonsdale, very well-known farm in Central Hawke's Bay. Apparently his father was also a casual labourer there, and so that is, I guess, how he acquired the job. Now, he was very innovative, and when the first motorbikes came out, he was very quick to buy one, and that would have been quite hair-raising on those shingle roads in those days. Jack stayed with the Bibbies, working at Lonsdale until the outbreak of World War I. Then he joined the Wellington Infantry Regiment. I believe he served that with distinction, and he was very fortunate. He returned from the war when he came back, he had various labouring jobs on farms around central Hawke's Bay until he retired and moved to Bibby's Lane in Waipawa. Now, it was interesting to note that actually the Bibbies owned either side of Bibby's Lane, so it did beg the question as maybe he actually bought his section straight off the Bibbies. I don't know. But this is where I came into contact with Jack Hardy. It was when he was living in Bibby's Lane, and we lived in the vicinity. A lot of older people, my age and older, not too many of us left around here, the old locals, we always remember him, the men will remember him by various nicknames. One was Judge Hardy. Haven't worked out how he got that name, but the other was Zambuk. Now, Zambuk came from the fact that he was a member of the St John Ambulance, and a very good member he was too, because he went to every rugby match down in Coronation Park, and he was the first aid officer. I think that Zambuk was some sort of liniment, which he must have spread liberally around the grazers of the various rugby players, and I think that's how the name Zambuk came. We children, of course, always knew him as Father Christmas. Not, of course, to his face. We were very polite. We always called him Mr. Hardy. But you can imagine he was a biggish fellow, even in older, and when he was older. He had flowing white hair and a very big white beard. So it was pretty obvious we children called him Father Christmas. Now, the other interesting thing about Jack was that he never married. So he always lived alone. I can always remember my mother used to worry about him, that he had no one to look after him. And I was often dispatched with jars of soup, especially in the winter, because poor Jack needed something warm to eat. The other thing that fascinated me, and I didn't know at the time, was when I knocked at the back door, which sort of went straight into the kitchen and living room area, that I was amazed because the whole floor was covered in wood shavings. Couldn't work that out. I thought, well, that's very strange. Our kitchen floor is not covered in wood shavings. And it was many years later that I realised he was a maker of gun stocks, and he had quite a little business there making gun stocks for rifles. But of course, now we know that he also ventured into violin making. Now, I believe that came around by the fact that he had a very good friend called Fred Rosenberg. And again, all the old Waipawa people will know that name very well. Fred was a lawnmower mechanic fixer-upper, and he also had an interest in clocks, and he'd fix old clocks and watches. He was also involved very early on with this museum when in the mid-80s. He volunteered here as well. But it was Jack and he that were the good mates, and apparently Fred had a book on how to make violins. Now, Jack was very interested in acquiring this book, so he rummaged through his big collection of books and found one on engineering. So he and Fred swapped books, and I believe that's where he got the instructions to make his violins. Now, of course, he had no tools, so I believe with his woodworking capabilities, he actually crafted his own tools and made the violin. It's debatable how many he made. There's a figure floating around that says he made 5. I've no reason to doubt that, but we have one, which is really important. The end of the story is quite sad. 2 young paper boys were delivering paper, the newspapers down Bibby's Lane, and when they went to give Jack his paper, they found him dead on the floor. That was the 11th of November 1955, and he was 76. Thank you.